Yeah, I think we're out there. I think
Here
we're
we are.
live today.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cuddle Conversations. This is, what is this? This is April, right?
It's April 21st, my father's birthday. Happy
Oh, happy
birthday, Dad.
birthday, Dad. How fun. And we are going to have a cuddle conversation today. So we love having a cuddle conversation because we love talking about cuddle fabric and making things out of cuddle fabric. And so let me just say hi. This is Ajaire Parello. She's our cuddle ambassador in Maryland. I almost said Virginia, and I was like, it's because we've gone.
Well, I'm also the Cuddle Ambassador in Virginia, too. There's only a few of us over here. So me and Dawn pretty much over in Virginia.
Awesome. And I am, my name is Sheila Ryan, and I'm a cuddle ambassador in Texas. And Ajaire and I have been traveling lately. So if we seem like we're still a little like, wait a minute, what day is it? Where are we? This is because we've been on the road for Shannon Fabrics teaching a super fun program that really ties into what we're going to be talking about today. But before we start talking about what we've been doing and all that, we want to talk about what we're actually going to do today. So in these cuddle conversations, you have the opportunity to join in with us for these conversations and get your burning questions about cuddle fabric and working with cuddle fabric answered. Today's topic specifically is about serging and overlocking on cuddle. So if you have not tried it and there are things about your serger and working with cuddle that you are interested in, this is your chance. So you can leave your questions in the comments. And we also want to invite you to share this to your social media streams. That helps us out. It helps us reach more people, because inevitably what happens is somebody will have a question and we're like, oh, we literally just talked about that this morning. So if you'll share to your network, that just spreads the cuddle love. And so we want to reach as many people as possible. And by doing so, you'll be entered to win. Not only will you win a prize from Shannon Fabrics, but you'll win a prize from our special guest today, which, Ajaire, do you want to talk about who our special guest is really quickly?
All right, so you guys have heard Sheila and I go on and on about serging this year. It's our new favorite thing to do with cuddle. And we've talked about how great it is and the classes we've been teaching. And today we have Miss Pam Mahshie with us today from BERNINA. So Pam is the Overlock business manager from BERNINA of America. And I'm going to pull her onto the stage and we'll get a chance to talk with her. Hey, Pam.
Oops. Hi, everybody.
Let's get this view. That's a better view. We'll get Pam on there. There you go. Yay. Now we got it all set up. So Pam,
thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Pam, you've been with BERNINA for how many years now?
I have been with BERNINA for 6 years.
Okay. And you've been serging a lot longer than that.
Serging, I don't even want to tell you how long I've been serging. I mean, it's been since the early 80s. Let's just put it that way. Early 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I know your title is Overlock Business Manager, but we always call you the Serger Queen, because if someone has a question about a serger, especially the BERNINA sergers, but I feel like pretty much any sergers, Pam has the answer for us. I pretty much can guarantee that. So
pretty much.
I'm so excited that you're here with us today.
Well, and you know what? It's the perfect month because it's serger month.
It is.
So what better month for us to come and talk about serging than in serger month?
Yes. And because it's National Serger Month, again, Sheila already said, if you guys share, like and share our feed, you are entered to win. We're going to do a fat quarter of quilting cuddle. So you can win a fat quarter of quilting cuddle pack. So the pack's there. And Pam also has something she's wanting to add to the giveaway, which is very exciting.
And then big book of serging quilting. So we'll give those away to the lucky winners out there. So like and share, and there you're going to learn more, obviously, about serging and what serging can do for you. And we've absolutely loved working with Shannon Fabrics in the cuddle programs that we're doing together. So I think we've all grown and we've all learned a lot over the last, it's not even been a year yet, but it's been so much fun for us to work together and partner together and be able to help people kind of overcome their fear of both the cuddle fabrics and serging.
Yeah. for sure.
I feel like that is probably the number one thing that we've been able to do with this Cuddle Up with BERNINA program, because people do get Cuddle is a different kind of fabric. It's not like our normal quilting cotton. It's not flat.
Right,
it
it's not flat.
And it has fluff, and it's also polyester, and it stretches. So all those things together make some people really apprehensive about it. And also, like, a serger is not a normal sewing machine. It's got a blade, and it's got all those needles and all that thread. And so those two things that could be really scary together, when we put them together, both of them are nothing burgers.
Both of them are perfect. They are perfect together. And, you know, it's kind of like peanut butter and jelly, right? I mean, you can have them individually, but when you put them together, they just create this magic. And it really is phenomenal how when you work with sergers, you know, Ajaire and I worked together just this weekend. And then Sheila, you and I kind of worked a little bit together when we were at the Houston Quilt Show last year. But what is so wonderful is how surprised people are on how easy both of them are to work with. And, you know, there are features that are on a serger, like the length of the feed dogs, which really helps in the feeding of the fabric so that they're not fighting against each other. They just feed together so well. And features that we talked about over the weekend, you know, like differential feed. Well, what is the advantage of having that and adjusting pressure on your presser foot? It just makes all of that, the machine working with the fabrics, it just helps it so much in the end result, because people were very surprised at how easy it was.
I love that. I love that whole thing that happens in the classroom, because it's like, oh, I had so much trouble working with this on my sewing machine. And that foot on the sewing machine, that's another factor. The foot's itty bitty. And with the serger, we generally have a bigger foot. On the BERNINA L890s, it's a nice 1 inch wide foot. It's 2.5 inches long.
Yeah.
I mean, you can really get some good control on your fabric with a foot that size.
Right.
A little foot, but that big foot's going to hold the fabric. You know, we've tweaked all of our settings, and we've got some things that we like using with Cuddle Fabric that you've helped us come up with. And really, it's just delightful to work with Cuddle Fabric and the serger. In fact, there's like, I'm almost, when I get my Cuddle out and I've got to work on a project, I'm like, how much of it can I do through the serger?
On the serger.
Yeah,
exactly. I was just saying, I got my for the first time, I got my serger service, just the annual service, last week. And when I was dropping it off, I was thinking, what am I going to do without this week? And as I'm driving home, Sheila's like, well, you do realize you have a sewing machine, right? And I was like, well, yeah, I probably should give my actual sewing machine some love. I'm like, I guess I should give my sewing machine some love, because it's gotten almost none. I just want to serge everything. And what I've loved in the classes is seeing, you know, again, as Sheila said, both of these two things can be daunting, but when they come together, it's almost like they forget that either of them is going to be daunting, because they're thinking of the other one. So they're so concentrated on thinking, oh, how do I manage the cuddle, that they're not even afraid to start serging. You know, you don't see that nerves like when people first go to start serging. So they're worrying about the cuddle so much, they're not worrying about that, and then they're not worrying about that, and then it just sort of builds on each other, and all of a sudden they turn around and they've made this gorgeous thing, and they're like, how did I do that?
How did I do that?
So well
because I was afraid of both of them when I walked in the door, and now look, I've come out and I have this beautiful project that I finished, and I wasn't afraid of either of them.
Exactly.
So let me ask both of you, what have you found was your biggest aha moment in using sergers with Cuddle?
Well, for me, I will say it's the fact that Cuddle is a knit. So I've serged with Cuddle for years and just not really thought much about it, because I serge a lot. And then as I was, you know, talking with people and we're going to these classes, I'm just doing the big throws. So all of our big Luxe Cuddle throws that we make, I'll never make one on the regular machine again, because that 4-thread safety stitch, the wide one, you know, BERNINA's got that nice 9mm wide safety stitch. It's perfect for those throws. it wants to hold its shape really nicely. So you've got those nice corners. It stretches a little bit. So if you pull, you don't have to worry about any stitches pulling. So it just was this aha moment of, why was I ever doing throws on a regular sewing machine? Like, it just made
well,
so
and
much sense.
you said this weekend too that, you know, if you're on the sofa and you're tugging against it, the stitches are not going to pop like they do on a sewing machine, because of the way that stitch is made. Is it's going to be flexible. It's going to have that flexibility in the stitch, and by using the 4-thread stitch, it helps compress that seam. And I think sometimes people are fearful because they think the seams are going to be too thick. And how am I going to control those seams? Where when you take that overlock stitch and it wraps the edge of the seam allowance, it just compresses it down. And by having that extra line of stitching, the right needle thread, it squishes it. It squishes it, compacts it down so that you do have a nice flat seam, and yet it's also going to stretch when you need it.
Absolutely. What about you, Sheila? What was the thing that you've
Okay.
blew you away?
Okay. Serging Cuddle. Y'all, this is crazy, because probably the number one concern that people have with Serging Cuddle is, what do we do about the fluff? Because there's a little bit of cuddle dust. And in a workshop, we teach people how to cut it so we don't get a lot of fluff. But we've got a blade with a serger. And so I know, I mean, I could see it in their faces. They're like, what is going to happen when that cuddle goes under the blade? And, you know, your serger comes with a little trim bin. So we put the trim bin on, and the cuddle dust is affected by gravity. I mean, it's not like we're doing this out in space, and all that cuddle dust just goes whoop in the trim bin. And it is so much less of an issue than we worry about it being. And, you know, now I live in Texas, which you do too, Pam. It's hot here. I got the ceiling fan on, but
all
even
the time,
fans on, like, the cuddle dust just goes into that trim bin. I empty it out at the end of the time I'm sewing, and it's nothing. It's not even a thing. In fact,
the serger runoff sort of follows itself. It like follows it in a line with that backing that's come onto, and it just goes right into that trim bin. So it doesn't make that cloud. There's no puff of, oh no. I've been shocked to see it does just go right where it's supposed to go.
It just the way that it's cutting it off and just falling right into that bin. It really does help. And, you know, people were surprised when they would come into class. I'm sure you've seen this too, where they're like, okay, you had a class in here right before we walked in, and there's not all this fuzz all over the floor. No, there's not all that fuzz all over the floor. And it, again, that overlock stitch helps contain any extra little bit that might be on there, so you don't have it. And as you were saying, Ajaire, this weekend too, that once it's the little bit of cuddle has come off, the fuzz, the cuddle dust has come off, that's it. There isn't going to be any more that's going to be coming off as you're sewing it.
Yeah, we have Shannon has this great fabric that Ajaire and I just absolutely love. It's called Milan.
Oh yeah,
it's right here. It's like super thick and puffy. So this is my Milan. That is like that's just.
It looks like a little a Lhasa Apso dog.
It does.
And this is the one I was saying you need. So this is.
But when you search it, you've got two layers of fabric that each have, oh gosh, like a ridiculous pile. And so you've got all this, but you know, we're compressing this with the serger, and we're trimming it off at the same time. And so this would be a little bit ridiculous. I mean, it's possible, but there's things that we've got to do. But doing it on the serger just makes it so easy.
Well, and you know why too? The height of that presser foot and the height of that cutting blade are so very important. And that's one thing that I find too with the BERNINA sergers, is that cutting blade comes up so tall that you're not having to squish down your fabrics to get them underneath the foot, nor to get them underneath the cutting blade when you're using that cutting blade. And, you know, with your fabrics being kind of stretchy, you don't want, and moving a little bit, by being able to adjust the presser foot pressure, is huge, and being able to make that adjustment, your fabrics are not going to be growing in length. When you start out with two pieces that are the same size, you don't end up with one being so much longer than what the other one is.
Exactly. And we talk a lot about that when we're doing a workshop. We talk about how we're going to be control freaks. Not that we have to do anything ourselves, but we're just using the machine and we're using some of our tools to control the fluffy fabric. And then voila, we've just done it. So yeah, there is nothing that I love more than doing something. I mean, like this is a big lot of floof, and it literally no time at all. I've got something really wonderful with it.
And when you're working with the weight of fabric too, again, we've been talking about the length of our feed dogs, but also that you have some support there on the side of your machine. Not a lot of sergers come with tables. So this gives you that added support that's also going to help kind of lift up that fabric for you as it's feeding through.
Yep. Okay. Should we get into some of our questions here? Because a ton of questions. They're just coming rapid fire.
I liked one that before we get into the question there, the Tisha says, I just want to say that I absolutely love those big scissors on your board, Pam. Those big scissors behind you. They're super cute. I just thought that was a fun little comment.
Okay. So this is my messy office right now. And we're all in the middle of, I'm in the office. We're in Aurora in the Chicago area. And I actually work from home, but I come into the office, but I also do a lot of traveling. So sometimes I'm in, you never know exactly where you're going to find me, but I do. We are getting ready for BERNINA University. So we have some new products and new things that we're going to be showing our dealers that will then in turn come to you.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's very exciting. All right. So here's a question. Let's just start out with Cindy's question. She says, I'm new to serging. How to best end or knot the thread so that it won't come undone? You can't just cut them, can you? That's a great question.
That's a really good question. And whether you're new to serging or you've been serging a long time, that's probably a question that people ask a lot. So the first thing is that if you are brand new to serging, you always have those tails. And typically when you are, let's say you're making one of these great cuddle blankets and you're going to stitch 4 sides and you're going to leave an opening to maybe turn it. So the sides where you serge off and then you have the horizontal and then you're going to do the vertical, you can leave that horizontal tail on. And then when you come back and you do the vertical, it's going to seal that. It's going to lock it in place. And typically what happens is that your needle threads are shorter than your overlock threads. So if you're concerned about your tail or chain coming undone, typically what I like to do is take my fingers and just slide the looper threads off, and you end up with those short needle threads. Now, you can just, if it's going to be on the inside, just leave a little longer tail and clip it off, maybe a 1/2 inch or so, and you won't have to worry about it. If you're going to be having your stitch exposed or you're worried about that the tail might come undone, there's a couple of different ways. You can either take a double-eyed needle and you can thread that tail through the stitch that you've already done, or you could tie a little knot if you need to. I am not a huge fan of like a seam sealant, especially around Cuddle fabrics, because that's going to make the ends very hard, and most of those seam sealants are toxic. So they're a liquid nylon, and you don't want to use those on children's, blankets, or if anybody's going to put anything in their mouth. So either tying it, sliding off those looper threads. But honestly, I've not really ever had a serger stitch really come undone. Now, you have an overlock stitch, and you also have the cover or chain stitch. So if you're working with your machine with a chain stitch, then you would want to lock the stitch at the end. And there are videos that are out there that show you the locking process or tying the end of that thread together. Okay.
Janice says, would you recommend woolly poly in the loopers for serging, or would just about any poly work fine? We all have probably a strong feeling about this, but tell us your take.
So as we kind of talked about earlier, a lot of times people will put the woolly or the poly woolly in their loopers thinking that it's going to make the stitch more stretchy, and that it really doesn't. I mean, your stitch is going to be stretchy just because of the way that the stitches are formed. The woolly poly sometimes is used so that the seam might be a little softer against your skin or on your body. Something that you can also do is, instead of doing a seam that we've been talking about, you could do a flat lock stitch. And if you do Sheila's all excited about her flat lock stitch. And if you do a flat lock stitch, now your seam is going to lay completely flat, where before you have a seam that stands up just like you normally do. But with a flat lock, the stitches pull apart and they lay completely flat. So you don't have a seam allowance that stands up, but it's tucked between those stitches. And with the way the stitches are formed and the cuddle that you're working with, just a quick little brush of your hand and all those little fibers are going to come right through those stitches, and you don't even see that a seam is even there.
Yeah. If you want to be able to see those stitches, then there's things that we've got to do when we're working with Cuddle in order to make those stitches show up better. So, but that's a whole different kind of fun. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Let's see.
Would you like to use the fabric for the back of a child's quilt? Is it easier to sew on with the serger than my sewing machine? Does serging cut down on the dust? So we talked about already the serging cutting down on the dust as it's cutting. You have to cut out your things initially, but then that serger knife is not creating any extra dust really. So Pam, maybe this is a good time to talk about even just, she's talking about quilting, but like even just piecing of quilting. I know that question has come up as well. How do you feel about quilting with the serger?
So I guess the question might be, if you're putting that on the back, are you finishing or binding your quilt, or are you using it as a backing that you're doing free motion quilting on top of, and then you're going to bind it in a way? So while I talk about two different things, maybe Cindy, you can answer that. But also, so if you're going to be binding, let's talk about two different kinds of binding. First, you can take your fabrics and you can put wrong sides together. And then you could use that 9mm wide stitch that Ajaire was talking about earlier and use a 3-thread stitch. There you could probably use your woolly or woolly poly thread, or maybe even a spaghetti thread that is a little bit thicker, that you could serge all the way around your quilt so that it's going to be, the stitch itself is exposed on the outside, right? So that's one way. That's one very, very simple way. And because your Cuddle fabrics, depending upon what you're putting it, the top is going to be, if it's also the Cuddle, you may have one direction that's a little stretchier than the other. So you may want to engage your differential feed a little bit more when you're going across the stretchy side. And then on the length, you can very easily adjust it back to the normal setting. So that's one way. But if you are using this for putting this is a backing for your quilt, and the quilt itself is going to be a cotton fabric, and you're putting a binding on with a cotton fabric, and your backing is Cuddle, you could very easily use a fusible thread, which I love, in my lower looper on your machine. And by using that fusible thread, when you take the binding and fold it over the edge of your seam that you've made, it will, and you press it, it's going to hold it in place. So that then you could hand stitch it or top stitch it, or even use a cover stitch to hold that binding in place.
I really love that. And the whole, I mean, you're really saving so many steps by using your serger for part of the quilting process. It's not do this, then glue it, then wait, then go back.
Right.
It's put the fusible thread in, put your fusible thread and the binding on at the same time, and then iron it, and then you're done. I mean, you're done. You're done.
And you know, with the Cuddle Fabrics, because it doesn't ravel, you don't even have to do a double binding. I know, I mean, I'm not a real quilter, so I wouldn't know what the quilting rules are if you do put a binding on, but you could do a single layer of fabric on that binding too, so that when you turn it over and then press, if you are using the Cuddle fabric as your binding, now you would be able to just very easily do a zigzag or a stitch to hold that in place.
You absolutely can. And you know, I love that you said that you're not a quilter. I mean, who really actually is a quilter? There are some people
I know, right?
quilters, but we're working with Cuddle anyway, so we're already breaking all of the rules.
We are. And you know what? That's even much more fun and more of a challenge, right? Sometimes when you do that. Okay, so how to reduce bulk when your seams come together. So you could, if you wanted to, if you're not using an overlock stitch, earlier we talked a little bit about chain stitching and cover stitching. So you could use a chain stitch. Also, I like to call it the serger straight stitch, because that's exactly what it's doing. So you have all the benefits of your serger, presser foot pressure, differential feed, but you're using a straight stitch that you're going to be working with on the machine. So now when you're stitching, you could, if you wanted to, press your seam allowance open, because sometimes people will, they like to press their seam allowances open, or they think that with a serger, the only stitch that you can do is an overlock stitch. So by using that serger straight stitch, one, you'll never run out of bobbin thread. So that's a great benefit. But also, if you are going to be using an overlock stitch and your seams are coming together, do like you would do in quilting and flip one way and one the other, and kind of nest those seams together too.
I also think another way is the flat lock stitch that you were talking about with Sheila. Depending on how they're coming together, that flat lock does end up with a flat seam versus like the seam allowance on one side like that. So it really does make it lower profile in that case too.
I'm going to go to my display back here. And I'm going to grab something.
Yeah, let's grab
real
it.
quick.
I'd like to see it.
It's just so much fun. Like, we just think, you know, and I know it's because we see all these quilty people and all they're doing is using their sewing machine, but we've got tips and tricks here, y'all, because there's many ways to get to the end result of the thing that we want.
Okay.
So
we
when
do have a serger tip sheet, I'll just say, so obviously you can't click the link that's on the screen here, but if you go to the Learning Center under tip sheets, we have a serger basics tip sheet that will talk about what settings you'd use when you're serging with Cuddle. So if you guys are wondering, you know, where do I start? That's a good place to start if you haven't already done it.
Now, what I grabbed, these are called height compensating tools, and these are fantastic. So when you're working with seams that are coming together, and especially since the feed dogs are so much longer, the presser foot is so much longer, and your feed dogs are longer, but your presser foot is longer. So what could happen is when you come to a seam, or if you're starting on a fabric, your presser foot could kind of tip backwards just a little bit. So it's kind of like coming onto or out of a snowbank, right? So what you want to do is level out your presser foot. So these height compensating tools, your presser foot will rest right onto that guide or tool, And what it will do is level out your presser foot so that when you are starting to serge, you can be serging straight on rather than having to climb up the hill and then have your presser foot come flat.
Yeah, we just want to do what helps the machine work the best, because we want to get the best stitch quality possible, so that we have something that's not going to come apart, that we're not going to have uneven stitches. I keep pointing over here because mine's sitting right here. Like these, my L890 is really just a fantastic tool for getting a very high quality seam. I mean, okay, so my little guy has a throw that I sewed it with a sewing machine. I know. And
you made it over a year ago, I'm sure.
Years ago. But every time it's come through the wash, I have to re-sew that part back up. Next time it comes through the wash, though, it's getting serged. But there's these other things that, like, I know that that's going to work because I've dialed in my settings, right? And so like that tip sheet that we posted there, if you don't know where to start with some of the suggestions that we already have for you on the tip sheet. Then if you're still experiencing some weirdness, maybe you need to get a compensating tool so that your presser foot is sitting correctly so it can make the best possible stitch. So there's all kinds of other little things on that tip sheet too. Like with Cuddle Fabric, we like to use a stretch needle in our sewing machines. Well, there's stretch needles for your serger too. So try one of those if you're getting skipped stitches. That same thing can happen on your sewing machine. So we're just making these little adjustments so we get the best possible stitches out of it.
So here's the other thing while we're talking about stitches. So when a lot of times when people are stitching, and because we're working with a heavier fabric, they feel they need to help their fabric through or under the presser foot. And again, because those feed dogs are longer and because the presser foot is longer, you're not having to help your fabric as much. So you're going to find, and we talked about this, that you're more or less tickling your fabric. You're just dancing your fingers on top without having to really pull it through or force it into under your presser foot as you're starting to stitch too.
I find myself using more often my hand underneath and kind of holding up the fabric and then barely doing anything with my left hand. If anything, maybe just a stiletto to help the top fabric through. But if I put my fingers on it, I'm inevitably doing the opposite of what the machine's trying to do for it.
Yeah. You lay your fingers, and we do it so unintentionally. We don't even know we're doing it. So a lot of times what I'll suggest is that even when you first start, just take the fabric, place it, just tuck it underneath the toe of your foot and just put your hands up in the air, step on your foot pedal and watch the fabric feed, because it will feed all by itself. And and then your mind is going, I don't have to do a whole lot of work. It's sending that message to your fingers, like, don't push too hard. And a lot of times, because we've had to do that in our past, our minds have been training our fingers that that's what we need to do all the time. Someone asked a question there about if we use the cutting blade or not, would that create a lot of cuddle dust? Well, first, when we were talking about this too, that when it cuts off, the fabric just naturally curls right down into that cutoffs bin, right? So it just naturally makes that curve to go into the bin. So there's not a lot of dust that's created, but also when you're using an overlock stitch, it's going to immediately encase that edge. So you don't have those fibers that are flying free or loose as you're stitching. And one thing I like to do is, even if I'm not cutting, my cutting blade is up. And the biggest part of working with sergers is that you very seldom watch your needle. You are watching the cutting blade, or you're watching the toe of your presser foot. Because think about it. If we are stitching and we are using our cutting blade, if we're watching our needles, oops, you might be cutting something that you didn't want to cut. because your cutting blade is in front of what your needles are. So it really does make more sense to, and you're, again, it's a little training that you're doing with yourself, but you do watch the edge of the cutting blade in relationship to the edge of your fabric versus the needle or the markings on the toe of your presser foot.
Yeah. And I also find that by just, like Pam said, even if you're not cutting off, you know, 1/8 of an inch, even if you're just brushing up against where that knife is, any of that cuddle fibers that are hanging off the edge will just get cleaned right up. So your actual stitch looks gorgeous. It's nothing hanging off the edge. There aren't any fibers poking their way through necessarily. It's just a beautifully clean stitch. So yeah, I always recommend keeping it up unless there's a real specific reason to put the blade down.
Yeah, and sometimes what happens too is that I think, well, if I put my cutting blade down, that means I can move my fabric over. Well, don't do that, because you have, we talked about the 9mm wide stitch that's on your machines. But if you move your fabric over the area where your cutting blade would be, there is inside of your machine, instead of a bobbin, there are those loopers that are there. And if you slide your fabric over too far, that upper looper is going to try and force itself into making a hole in your fabric.
Yeah. And that is just, that's really not fun. So we don't want to be pushing the fabric all the way over there. It is different. We can't say it's the same as doing it on your sewing machine. It is a very different process, but you're right. And I'm laughing because that Milan throw that I just showed you on the inside, I've done it a couple of ways so that I can turn it wrong side out and show people this is why you want to use your knife. Even if you're not cutting, we're just going to use it as a little guide. Now, my serger comes with a little seam guide that I can attach. But more often than not, I'm just going to use that knife as a visual, like to help me know where I'm driving. It's like the curb on the street. We don't.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Or sometimes I call it the bumper guards. You know, if you've gone bowling or something, it's kind of that bumper guard, the safety right there on the edge.
I need all the help like that I can get, right? Bobby asked, recommendation on using batting on cuddle quilts. And this is a great question because for those of you that are quilters, like you came at it from the quilting side of it, you're probably using cotton fabric on the front and the back and a cotton batting, because when it all gets washed, the cotton shrinks, the cotton fabric shrinks, and you get this lovely crinkle. Well, with cuddle fabric, we're really not getting crinkle, right? Because polyester doesn't shrink. So because our polyester fabric doesn't shrink, we want to stick to a polyester batting. The great thing is too, when we're serging, we're generally using a polyester thread. So polyester all the way through.
Absolutely.
Now, I've also heard where I think Ajaire last weekend, people were asking about battings also. And you had also mentioned that sometimes you don't use batting at all.
Yep, it's really personal preference. So especially if you're doing any of the strip quilts and things like that, you can choose whether you want to put a batting in or not. Oftentimes the cuddles are thick enough that you've got a really beautiful, heavyweight, thick blanket, throw style quilt, versus if you put batting in there, it's a little bit stiffer often. Not the fabric on the outside, it has the same softness, but the batting just holds it tighter in there.
The structure.
Yes. So it really depends on what you're looking for. But yeah, if you do use batting, poly is the way to go for sure.
Yeah. There's an earlier question I don't want to skip, but somebody asked, which stitch are we generally using on the L890? And are you just finishing the edge or actually stitching two pieces together with the stitch? This is fun. This is like a big old topic. So Pam, tell us what your opinions are.
So if I'm not using the serger straight stitch, a lot of times I'm using a 4-thread overlock. And I like that 4-thread overlock. We touched on it briefly a little bit earlier, but I like the 4-thread because 2 needles, and for those of you that aren't familiar with serging, 2 needles are going to run straight lines of stitching. And then you have an upper looper and you have a lower looper. And I always say, it took hours of meetings to figure out the name of those two, because the upper looper always stays on top of the needle plate and the lower looper always stays on the lower part of your needle plate. So hours of discussion for those names. But what happens is that 4-thread stitch actually compresses your seam allowance together, reducing the bulk so that you don't have that thickness on each of your intersecting seams. Now, if you are working on a particular project that maybe you want to have, maybe you're working with the cloud cuddle. We'll just use that as an example. And it's 2-sided. And that's on the inside. You want your seams to be a little bit, because it's so fluffy on the inside too. And you want to have the seams be a little more, they look more like the fabric itself. So there I might use a 3-thread overlock stitch so that my seam allowance isn't compressed down so tightly. Did that answer that?
That's a great answer. Mm-hmm.
This is a fun.
So one thing I do want to just say with that one question you had is typically we're not using the serger to finish the seams with Cuddle, because Cuddle doesn't fray, it doesn't unravel. So it's not like a cotton where you need to lock those threads in or else it's going to come undone. So the reason we're using the serger is for the other benefits, like that 4-thread safety stitch where it's a super strong, a little bit stretchy stitch to compress the seams, things like that, versus making sure it's finished, quote unquote.
Right. And again, the nature of that stitch. Now, with the BERNINA machines, when a serger stitch is created, it will naturally stretch.
Yeah.
But if you decide, and when you open the seam, because we're working with the Cuddle, it fills in between all of those little stitches. But because on the BERNINA machines, you have total stitch control, you can control those stitches however you want them to be looking or made, depending upon the fabric that you're working with. So if you decide that you want to pull some of the stitches tighter, you can do that. Or we experimented with how much loop that you have on the edge of your fabric. So you can control all of those different settings. But I think Michelle might be in the market for a new machine.
I know, you're the right one to answer this question for sure.
She's asking, well, what's serger? She doesn't have one yet, but which machine do you recommend for a beginner? Well, one thing that I would always recommend, and a feature that has been on sergers for since the early 90s, is air threading. And that is a huge, huge time saver, because when you're threading your machines, you can thread in absolutely any order. So the first thing, it's not necessarily a specific model of machine, but what features might you be looking for in the machine itself? So the first thing I would look at is, does it have air threading? Because that's going to save you a tremendous amount of time. And then you want to look at, do I want to have a machine that only does overlock stitching, which is going to be the 4-thread that we've been referencing, the 2-thread, anything that encases the edge of your fabric? Or do I want to expand a little bit more and use a machine that is called a combo machine? And this combo machine does both overlock stitching and it does chain and cover stitching or serger straight stitching. So you have to kind of decide which one. There are many BERNINA machines that are in the line in various price ranges. So I would definitely, go in and check it out and see which machine kind of fits you best in features and also price.
Mm-hmm. When we talk to embroiderers, I talk to embroiderers a lot, but we always say, get a machine that you can grow into, because
Absolutely.
sometimes we think, oh, I just need the basics. And then you learn about a technique and your machine doesn't do that. And so if you can add cover stitching now, go ahead and do that, even if you're not doing it, because inevitably that project's going to come up. You're going to get that pattern, and there's 40, not 40, but there's 16 extra stitches that you could play with in the cover stitching mode that you might have wanted. And if you had known then, you could have just added that all at once. Right. So we of course, we're using the L890s, which are the top end BERNINAs, but go into your dealer and serge on them and see how.
Now, another feature that I do want to point out, because one thing with sergers is that people, we talked about this earlier, they're kind of afraid of them, and the way that you set up the machines. And in the BERNINA machines, you have what's called guided and expert mode. So the guided mode in your machine is all of those tutorials, all of the step-by-step settings. I like to call it the GPS of sewing, because it walks you through and holds your hand every step of the way, from whatever stitch you're on to whatever stitch you're going to. And Ajaire heard me say this last week, no Swiss stone is left unturned when they do this, because they go through every single little detail of the setup of your machine.
Yeah, and so Mary Ryan, she says over here that she found the video support on the L890 was so impressive that she had to get it. I mean, really, the videos, even just on the screen of the L890 itself, as you're walking through, there's little video icons you can press to remind you what you're even doing. If you're not even sure what the wording means.
How to change your foot, how to put your needles in. We brought out these machines in July of 2020. So it wasn't the height of COVID, but it was still COVID. And our dealers were terrified to bring out machines, a new machine during COVID. And oh my gosh, a serger at that. I can't, my customers can't come in. They're going to have all of these questions. We sold so many of these machines during that time. And customers, it was kind of a curse and a blessing. The blessing side was customers could learn how to use their machines just by watching those videos that are built in on their machines.
Absolutely. It really is. And it's not like in the olden days where you had to sit with your book right next to the machine. You're always flipping. Like, what am I doing again? Let's turn all the dials. The L890 is wonderful because you handle all of those things just right on the screen, and you can make your adjustments if you want to.
If you want to, but you don't have to.
Right.
Because the machine makes those changes for you. So that beautiful screen that's on the machine doesn't just indicate to you what you need to do. It will actually make the changes for the settings on your machine for you. So you don't have to remember them or write them down or find the notebook that you wrote them down in, or find your instruction book or your threading chart, because it's so easy to use, very easy to follow step-by-step instructions that are all right there.
Yep, I definitely agree that the best option for you is to go to your local dealer, and they'll have many options for you to try out. They can talk you through what your specific needs are, what you're thinking of. And like Sheila said, think ahead, try to plan, grow into a machine. If there's some features that you think, I don't know if I'd use that, you may end up wanting to use that, and you don't want to have to replace the machine with something else, and you're limiting. Yes, exactly. Right. So,
and for those of you that are Cuddle sewers already, I would say take some scraps of your C3 and your Lex Cuddle with you to the dealer and see how they handle on the machine that you're thinking of. That's and now you Cuddle sewers are already smart. So we've got a serger tip sheet. Take that with you and make those adjustments on the machine that you're testing, because we talk about lowering the presser foot pressure, and we talk about adjusting the differential feed to help us. So your dealer may not know that. So go in armed with all of the information, and that way when you're driving something, you already know how to
set it up. And ask those questions, because not every machine has those adjustments that we've been talking about. So it's, if you are going to be spending a large percentage of your time sewing on the Cuddle fabric, you want to make sure that it has those features that that Cuddle tip sheet, Serger tip sheet that they have on the Learning Center has, because otherwise you're going to be limiting yourself again, or you're then going to say, well, this doesn't work. And it's
or you'll think that we were wrong in telling you how easy it is
exactly,
to use, because the features of your machine aren't the same features we've been using. So, yep, for sure.
And ask when you go in, if they say, oh yeah, we have pressure adjustment, find out how it's done, because there are multiple and different ways of doing it. And can you adjust it enough for the type of fabric that you're going to be sewing on? Some are going to be much more limited in the amount that you can make an adjustment.
Absolutely.
Now, Jana had a question there. She was asking about a machine for kids, if they're going to be learning to sew. So are they learning to sew Cuddle fabric, or if they're learning to sew other types of fabrics? That might be another point to this.
It was answered in the comments, and they said they suggested not getting a specific kids machine because there are many basic sewing machines that, again, the kid can grow into. Just if you think that your kid's going to be interested in it, I feel the same way, that you're better off getting a basic regular sewing machine than some of the kid ones. And it really depends on the age, I guess. Oh, this is a great question that follows up. To what age would you say for a child to start learning to use a serger? Pam, what do you think about that?
This was one thing. My mom and I used sergers a lot together. And when she was teaching sewing classes to our Girl Scout troop, Pioneer group, what have you, her thought was, I want to put them on sergers first before I even put them on a sewing machine.
Interesting.
And part of that was, and I agree with this in that, yeah, she was my mom, so I do want to agree with her on that. But in the way she was talking about it, it made so much sense, because one, they don't have bad habits. Two, when you're using a serger, and a lot of times kids, when they're working with machine, when they're making something, and they sew the seam on the serger and they look at it, they're like, this looks like something I could buy at the store, right? And sometimes with our sewing machines, it doesn't look like that. So they might go, I'm not interested anymore. But I would say someone that's probably around 10 to 11. I mean, my grandsons, they come in, they're 8 and 10. My kids, boys, they learned to sew when they were probably 8 years old also. And it is, I think part of the thing is people are fearful about sergers because they're like, oh, it has a blade.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're not going to put your fingers in there, right? And the way that you are not forcing the fabric in to the machine does it for you. So it's not that you're having to control the fabric like you would even on some sewing machines.
Absolutely.
I think of the whole process is that we're leveling up our sewing by adding serging and cover stitching. And so, and isn't that what we're all trying to do anyways, to grow our skills, grow our experience? And so, let the kids, let them cook, as they say.
Let them cook. And, I also think that kids now have much better fine motor skills because they work on their cell phones a lot. And they understand a lot more than I think sometimes we ourselves are limiting them from some of the things that they want to do or want to learn to do.
For sure.
That's for sure.
All right,
Okay.
well, we're getting close to our end time here, so we should start. Any final questions? Did you have anything else, Sheila? I feel like I could sit here and ask Pam questions all day long.
I feel like I could too. I mean,
I did last week.
Yeah, that's what we do. We're like, we could talk. Do you want to talk about sewing? Did you want to talk about Serging? Did you want to talk about cuddling? That's what we
I'm
do.
like, is there any other topic to talk about besides sewing? You take us out of the sewing community in other social areas, and you're like, what do we talk about?
That's why we like to get together so we can still talk about sewing.
That's right.
Look, we've got some winners. So here's today's winners: Jewel Williams, Bobby LeBlanc Yoder, and at Kimmy Yours 7848 from over on YouTube. If you guys will email info@shannonfabrics.com with your name, your shipping information, and make sure you include your phone number on there and put in the subject line live winner, we'll make sure that you get these prizes. So we are so glad that everybody joined us today. This was a super fun conversation. And Pam, we cannot thank you enough for not only being here for National Serger Month, which is just awesome, but also the guidance and the expertise that you've shared with us to help us all become better at what we love doing. So
perfect. My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. It's been great to be able to work with all of you and work with those lovely Cuddle Fabrics, and all of you out there watching. If you see at your dealer there's a Cuddle Up with BERNINA program, make sure to sign up, because you will absolutely love it. You'll be able to experience the great Cuddle Fabrics and sergers and for yourself and get that hands-on experience. And we're going to come around with Cuddle too, so watch out for that too.
Yes, keep up to date on it. We've posted our Facebook page with the events on it. You can also find those events on the Shannon Fabrics homepage. And also just stay tuned, because while Ajaire and I have hardly been home because we've been doing Cuddle Up, there is more to come. We are not done yet. In fact, I'm already almost completely booked for September and October with Cuddle Up round 1, but Cuddle Up round 2 is coming with a whole new set of projects. So
if we've already been through your dealer, we may be coming back with a second round. So make sure you're checking in.
Here's what I want to challenge you, all of you watching, is if you went to Cuddle 1 and you loved it, I'm challenging you to bring a friend. I want you to bring a friend to one of those Cuddle events, because if you loved it, you know they're going to love it too.
Absolutely.
So much fun. They're so much fun. Well, thank you again, Pam. And thanks to Ajaire, as always, for being here. And thanks to Shannon Fabrics for just making this wonderful fabric so that the world becomes a softer place.
Softer place. That's right. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Happy Serger Month.
Bye, guys.
Bye.